So today, or actually rather, I'll start with yesterday, we heard about very inspirational progress now and on the horizon from the lab. And today we'll try to turn that vision and insight to the clinic, where there are also advances and much progress being made, and we think dramatic progress ahead. But, you know, as yesterday we heard about how slow mouse models can be and how we need to accelerate those, we have to remember also that in the clinic things do take a lot longer. And so we'll be highlighting some of the advances on a different time scale that we've seen, both from surgery to liver-directed local therapies, adjuvant therapy, local management of complications, and then later today, systemic chemotherapy in clinical trials, as well as the path to drug approval. So today's focus is really on taking what we heard about yesterday to the clinic. And so before we start, though, as Stacy said, we wanted to get a patient perspective, and so I'd like to introduce somebody who it was my great honor to meet yesterday, Ms. Bita Brun, who is an executive, a mother, and a cholangiocarcinoma patient, not in that order.
Good morning, everyone. I think I'd reorder to mother first, probably the hardest job, mother or father, that many of us will gracefully hold. So I'm delighted to be here. I have no words on my slides, purely pictures, so this will be a little bit of a different presentation. I have said this to Stacy and Kelly and Gassan and Lorraine, part of my tribe here, that I think I'm one of the most unexceptional people around, but I'm thrilled to talk to you about what I find exceptional in my days. So with that, I will just give you a quick background. I am, as Lorraine and I fondly will say, I'm a pack mule. I sort of, you can throw arrows at me, you can cut me, feed me with all sorts of compounds, and I think that always in my life I've just really focused on continuing to move. And obviously this has been a great test of that, but that's something that has always given me strength. So I was born in Iran in 1972. We moved during the revolution, and so a trying time. I grew up on the West Coast for the most part in a very loving, wonderful family with no boundaries. I see another good friend in the back, Gary, who's met many of my family members, and as Gassan, my doctor, will attest, I think we had, 8 or 9 people in my first clinical session with you, so truly the pack remains. I went to the East Coast for school. I studied literature. I worked first in the fine arts for an auction house. I went back to grad school. And then I worked for about 18 years in asset management at JP Morgan, and had a very intense work-life balance, and one that I enjoyed, but one that was sort of full steam. And I think, I've said this a moment before, but really how I would introduce myself most honestly to the core is that I am a very proud mother and daughter and friend and sister. And so all of that plays into what you see before you, which is really kind of a picture of what my life looked like before December 9th, 2015, which was full of family and children and beautiful California skies and sunshine. And down here, is this the pointer? Let's see. This is my brother Kamran, who has, despite the fact that he lives in a different state, he comes to absolutely every appointment with me, as does my wonderful husband, Henrik. This is when we were married. This is actually when I was pregnant with my third child. Cholangio wasn't the first huge obstruction that we hit in our life. I carried a third child to term and had a stillborn son. And in moments like this, I feel the need to exert that he existed, and I'm very proud to be his mother. Should I click again? Let's see. Oh, sorry. Okay. Here we go. So this was sort of the picture at around December 9th, when I was diagnosed with stage 4 cholangio, inoperable cancer. I got into Memorial Sloan Kettering that same day, and I remember calling several dear friends and former colleagues and saying, when is it that you pull out all stops? And they said, today. So we literally called everyone we knew, and we got into Sloan Kettering that same day, which I think is a feat perhaps harder than getting into the White House, but certainly much more rewarding for me. The day was a blur, but in many ways it was also imprinted in my soul, I would say. There are many reminders of the day, and for some reason, oops, I'm gonna go back. For some reason, I've kept some of this. Let's see if I can go back. So this was just a sheet of paper that I had with me. It was like, a utility bill that I was carrying around. And this was my Scrabble the first day. Who's the doctor I want to see? What time are my appointments? I remember the day having running shoes on because we just needed to sprint from whatever appointment we could get to the next. The day also was one of family, my children, the sort of the silly stuff that happens in life. In the upper right, my younger son Jasper got a big bump in the playground, which he does, and this is his nurse's rendition of a bandage. Flowers, lots of food, and then the journey continued. Another bump on the head for Jasper in the top left. These are my parents. Some things that I keep in my office, sort of an inspirational board of words that are meaningful to me. Remind me to tell you about the tongue in a moment. This is the perhaps absurd side of this disease. I remember at the same time, my son was presenting a chronological sort of history of our family and our origins. And so, despite the diagnosis, you have to be the mom and go in and sort of, see the presentation. And I was thrilled to do so. But there was also, me starting chemo and then later on losing my hair and later on wearing a wig. Later on, carrying in the bottom right, you'll see this was my rendition of a cooler bag for my 5FU that I had to carry around. So yes, I'll have to get you that. So from the sort of sublime to the ridiculous, your life continues, and yet you've hit an extraordinary moment where your core, your foundation has really been shaken. If you will indulge me, I'm going to ask you all to close your eyes for just a moment and imagine, if you are a caretaker or a patient, imagine being a clinician or a scientist and feeling the deep need to come to a cure and better outcomes for your patients. And now, if you're a clinician or a scientist, I ask you to imagine being a patient or a caregiver. I'm not sure which is harder. And imagine going home to your family tonight and telling your children, telling your mother, telling your father, and your friends about this massive behemoth that has been placed in front of you. And think about just how that translates. For me, I think the hardest part of this whole journey has been guiding my children and my husband and being guided by them, frankly. But those two are moments that are imprinted in my soul, and I will carry with me forever. So the next page, this is sort of a synopsis or a summary of my part of what my healing has entailed. So in the upper left, you'll see my doctor, who I've referenced, and I'll ask him to stand for just a moment, Ghassan Abu Alfa, who is an extraordinary man. And I think many of you know this. Many of you know this, but Ghassan, still stand. Ghassan had an extraordinarily horrible accident about a year ago, last spring, less than a year ago, which frankly was almost as hard, or perhaps in the same, I'd say, orbit as the day that I got diagnosed, was the night that I got a call from one of Ghassan's colleagues saying that he had been in a car accident and we weren't sure if he was going to live. And I remember just being absolutely shattered. And you'll see on this same page, this is Ghassan's beautiful, wonderful, extraordinary wife, who is also an oncologist at Memorial. This down here is Ghassan's son at our Cycle for Survival race, which I'll tell you about in a moment. And it was this crazy moment where the exercise that we've just had happened, right? I suddenly felt like I was a part of the caretaking team, and Ghassan had become the patient. And in all of the sort of many myriad thoughts that I had had during my struggle, I never envisioned this outcome. Ghassan miraculously survived, and I really do attribute that to science and great doctors, but to faith and to an extraordinary will to live. So now I ask you to really clap for this man who is a miracle. I also embarrass Ghassan by telling him constantly that I love him, which makes many doctors uncomfortable. But I have often said also in front of his wife that I am not in love with your husband, but I do adore him, and he is my family. More family that I've met through this journey is featured prominently in the center of this page. This is Lorraine Toohill, who has become a sister to me. Lorraine and I were diagnosed very close to one another, and Ghassan actually put us in touch with one another. We live on different coasts, but in many other ways, we felt like our lives were mirror images. Lorraine's also from a country outside of the United States, from Ireland, so the color green resonates, I hope, with you throughout these days, and has 2 children about exactly the same age as I do, you know, an extraordinary and gracious and loving husband. And you'll see my husband, who I've somehow neglected to talk about, Henrik, in the right here, and Lorraine's husband, Pete, I think in many ways really ought to be the ones who are soul brothers. And this was a part of my recovery, and I remember I'd call this the sort of sprint phase of the recovery. Lorraine and I and another soul sister, Danielle Dellerson-Hayes, who's on the very top, formed a team and decided we wanted to raise some money for cholangiocarcinoma research. So within the span of a few months, we raised $1.2 million. And the year before, I had raised a couple $100,000, just a couple of months after my own diagnosis. So in the aggregate, we've raised nearly $1.5 million, all of which is at Ghassan's disposal, with the strict orders of this goes toward research and research towards cholangio. It's a point of pride for me. I mean, $1.5 million is a lot of money on one hand. It's also a drop in the bucket in other ways when it comes to research. But I will say that in the history of Cycle for Survival at Memorial Sloan Kettering, we outdid the largest corporate team by at least 2 times. So it was more money than had ever been raised. And as Ghassan has told me again and again, and I think Lorraine and I have taken to heart, we had reason to be proud because we were all patients as we were doing this with busy lives. Tragically, we lost Danielle last year. She's with us always. We talk about her with great heart. You know, it sort of underscores how serious all of this is. But we remain committed to moving on. I'm also going to ask you just quickly to do another exercise. Please raise your hands if you're here from outside the United States. And raise your hands if you live in the United States now. And keep your hands raised if you are an immigrant. So lots of hands, and I will say, as I go on to my next page, or perhaps this was on a former page, there was a quote from Memorial Sloan Kettering that came out, I remember, on social media that said, we basically don't care where you're from or what you do, but we are the strength of our whole. And this has been a fractured time in our country, certainly, and in the world. And it's given me great faith to see just how diverse our community is. And I'm proud to say that my doctor is from Lebanon, I'm from Iran, Lorraine is Irish, and we are proud Americans and proud contributors to what happens here. This next page is sort of what keeps me going. My husband in the top left has truly been a rock by my side, and as Ghassan might attest to, we're sort of the most dangerous types of patients because we think that we have a little bit of aptitude and the ability to read. So we'll try to interpret scientific texts where we really have no business foraying. And so Henrik and I and my brother always show up at your doorstep with a list of at least 100 questions. And Ghassan, I will say, is not just an extraordinary doctor and specialist in the field of cholangio, but he is kind and gracious and embraces us in every way we need. And then there's just the sort of ridiculous and sublime. I now am a full-time mom as well, and I pick up my children from school every day, and this is my 9-year-old Cyrus, my first son, who no matter what the day is or how late I pick him up from school, there's always like a, come on, Mom, I'm not ready to see you. I want to keep playing. And my Jasper, who runs into my arms, my little one. Down here at the bottom, you'll see Danielle and her cycle efforts and extraordinary team, and Lorraine and her team out west. This is my brother and my niece. He's putting a crown of flowers on her head at a family wedding. Talismans have become an incredibly important thing to me. You'll see all the bracelets and necklaces and things that I wear that really there's a physicality to it that really helps and guides me. And it may seem unimportant somehow, but for me it's like a physical reminder that I have my tribe. There's a small picture, I'm not sure if you'll see this, but I live in New York City, and New York City's constant construction and noise and movement, and my children go to school in the West Village downtown, and there is this beautiful garden that we have at our school with an old church brick wall that probably dates back to the 1800s that is really only a shell that remains, and there is an exquisite beauty to it. It is broken, it is masterfully created, and it stands in the face of a big, bright, new city. And there's something that I love about that. We've heard a lot about alternative therapies as well, and I have an acupuncturist who's come to be critical in my journey of healing. And Heidi will often talk to me about the art of kintsugi, which is a Japanese art that talks about healing broken vessels and binding something that has been broken, and really sort of emphasizes the notion that putting broken pieces back together and binding them with whatever agent you have makes for a stronger vessel than one that has not been broken. And finally, I'll leave you with one last image. So this is Cyrus, my 9-year-old, and his best friend, Jackson. This is just a picture that gives me immense pride and joy. Jackson was born 9 years ago with only one hand, and he is certainly the best athlete at our school. And he is a constant testament to me of what resilience really is from infancy on. Jackson's extraordinary mother, Rachel, says in this social media post, can't get enough of this moment. Little boys, teeth, Star Wars, friendship, growth, joy, youth, innocence, possibilities, and love. And that is an image that I keep with me. So thank you.